Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 5. Before I get started, I do want to apologize for not having this out earlier and not having the email out earlier. I had last 40 hours, I've had a family medical emergency that's sort of been a lot's just been going on, so I haven't really had the chance to be on and around my camera and the internet as much. So again, I apologize, and I'm hoping that everything it's looking good. Things are looking like they're on the upswing, so I don't think it'll keep being an issue, but I just wanted to let you know that. So this week, we're continuing our Unit 3, Reading and Organizing Effectively. Whereas last week, we sort of focused on the reading aspect, with the scholarly summary, that was doing a deep reading and effectively doing the summary. And I apologize that I don't have those graded yet. I have started them. Some of you likely have them by now, but I don't know how many people. Usually I have those done by now, and then so the summary, you're reading deeply and sort of organizing your thoughts around it. And then the rating review is just another step of that. You're doing a deep reading, and then you're organizing that deep reading in a way that involves all of your sources, and you're sort of both summarizing but also synthesizing. So you're doing that deep reading you did in the scholarly article, and then you're doing that deep reading and organizing that information to do something like more useful. So this week we're going even a step beyond that. There's this discussion forum like usual, and the discussion forum this week is a little bit, I don't know if I would say it's easier. It's a lot more writing. There's 4 questions in each section. A question I want you to do 3 or 4 sentences on, so about a solid paragraph. So it's probably a little more writing than you're used to, but at the same time, it's a lot more basic in the sense that I'm trying to have you relate your real life to academic organization. So I'm asking you questions about, how do you organize in real life? When have you failed to organize in real life? How can you bring these skills over, or whatever? So hopefully that's not too difficult. That's just really just trying to get you in the mindset for the rest of the week, really get you to start thinking about how you already effectively organize or don't. That's also a possibility. I know it took me a while to learn to organize efficiently and effectively. So that'll be a little bit of work, but it won't be too difficult. It's due tomorrow. Wednesdays, as always, 11:59 p.m. And you're basically just going to go through the steps and then read other people's processes and comment on those. For the most part, your comments have been fairly good. There is a lot of, I agree with this, or this is a good point. I would like a little bit more in depth than that, but it's not, the end of the world. I really do just want you to read the other people's stuff and engage with them in a helpful way. So, the second thing we're doing is outline. I'll go over that more in depth. That's the meat of this week. It's sort of what this unit builds up to. And then there's some readings. So this week you'll be reading Organizing Your Projects, Chapter 14, and then part of Chapter 22, Creating APA Style and In-Text Citations. At this point, we know how APA reference lists work. It's very likely, that you've all had to, even if you haven't created your own APA reference, reference citations, you've seen those by copying and pasting the ones from the links. So you know how those look, and you know how those handle, and you've read the chapter on APA citation. Now you'll be learning how to cite your text in APA, interior of the text and not just in the reference page. And this will be fairly simple. Most in-text citations this is APA, so your in-text citations will have a signal phrase, and then they will directly after the signal phrase they will have the date it was published, and then it will have the quotation or the summary of the quotation or whatever. APA is pretty standard in this way. For instance, it'll look something like this, like Dr. Rogers, parentheses 2018, says that the likenesses of athletes in amateur basketball are used to generate X amount of money, period. That would be like a summary line or paraphrasing, but that's still basically how it's going to look. You're going to give us the signal phrase, which is also going to include the author's name, last name usually, and then you're going to give immediately the parentheses about the parentheses that have the date in it, and then the rest, whether that's a paraphrase, whether that's a text, or whether that's direct text, whether that's a summary of something. You've all sort of already read about those kind of things, and you go a little bit more effectively in how to cite next week, but that's going to be important for the outline. The other things you're going to have access to this week is going to be some documents just talking about thesis statements, the initial one, and then also just the thesis statements in general. At this point, it's already expected that having taken English 101, Comp and Rat, you've done theses before. You might not have done an argumentative thesis, which is what we're trying to tackle with this paper. We are definitely trying to tackle an argument. But you have all at this point written a thesis before, even if you don't remember that that's what it was called or whatever. But that being said, it is very likely that you haven't written a ton of theses. Like, even if you took a pretty full load in your first semester, and this is your second semester, and you haven't taken a lot of writing classes. I mean, at this point, this is fall, so most of you likely are either freshmen, which you shouldn't anyways. But likely you've read some theses. But these will give you some help. It's completely likely that you might need a refresher. You might need that little extra reminder of what's happening. Or if if this feels new to you and you don't remember doing a thesis before, that's okay too. Just make sure you use these resources and then potentially branch out if you feel that new to writing a thesis. But hopefully these two documents will be useful. And the other resource for this week is citations. There will be a link to that, and it'll be a link to the library guide that goes over some citation examples, what you need to be doing. It gives you how to cite in humanities, although for the most part we're not doing humanities, we're doing APA, but it also gives you information about APA. There also will be two other resources. I'm going to upload some examples of outlines, some effective outlines, and then I'm also going to include another link to the LibGuide that's going to go over basically how to write an outline, and it's going to go very in depth. I'm definitely going to go in depth into this. Well, and it's probably not that in depth, actually. I'm scrolling through it right now. It's good, it's useful, and there's a video presentation by Becky that's really helpful that I've watched. But it's going to help sort of break stuff down for you a little bit. Of course, after reading the organization stuff and looking at the examples, this will give you another good piece of the puzzle. But yeah. So I'm going to get a little bit more in depth into what an outline is, what we're expected to do in an outline, this outline at least, and kind of going forward. So if you click on it, it'll look a little bit bigger than normal. That's just because it already has the template that I expect you to use. You technically don't have to use this exact template. You can vary from it to some extent, but even if you don't use this exact outline, there's still stuff that I want you to, that you need to have. And I'll kind of go through that. So, really, you know, if you read through it, you'll see stuff like it needs to be double spaced. Yeah, I mean, whatever. You need to have a research question and your initial thesis. So the question you've been asking up until this point, and then the thesis, which should be sort of like the statement telling you how you have answered that question. So if my question is like, should NCAA athletes be paid, then my thesis would be like, these athletes should be paid because of X. The thesis is the answer to the research question. It's the thing that you're going to prove in your paper. So that shouldn't be too difficult for you. You're going to be including evidence from the sources, and you're going to be included in-text citations. So in the past, you've looked at evidence, you've read evidence, you've even summarized and used evidence in the last 2 assignments. But now we're actually going to be getting in-depth into that evidence, and we're going to be citing that evidence. There's other basic assumptions. You have the research question, you have the thesis. You're going to have an introduction that is going to be, you can consider it to be like sort of a test run at an introduction to your paper. Because that's the thing about this outline, is the assumption of this outline is you're going to take everything we've done before, and this is the first step on the paper. So you know what your topic is, you know what your research has to say, and you're going to kind of move forward with that, and that should be useful. So yeah, your introduction, which is going to have an A, B, and C. You're going to do an example of you can do your introduction sort of however you want, but this is just like a pretty good formula on how to do an introduction. It'll very likely change between this and your paper. And then your thesis statement. So not only will you have it at the top, but you'll probably want it in your introduction. And then you'll have a section which is called literature review. And this will just be like a 1-paragraph sort of summary of your literature review. I know that seems kind of silly. The literature review is sort of a summary of your research. Basically, this section is going to be a summary of that summary, of that literature review. Just like basically a paragraph telling me like what you ultimately discovered about your research as a whole. And then from there, you're actually getting into the bones of your, outline. Now, again, you don't have to use this this exact format if you don't want. You don't necessarily have to go Roman numeral and then capital A and then 1 and then little Roman numeral and then lowercase like alphabet. You don't necessarily have to do it this way, but you do need to sort of follow this pattern if you decide to diverge from this. If you decide to diverge from it, you still need to sort of follow this pattern of point 1 of thesis, evidence from the source, and then sort of like the 1 and 2 section, which is going to go like more in depth from that evidence. So if you go into it, we have point 1, 2, and 3 of your thesis. It's likely, if not very probable, that you're going to have more than 3 thesis points. You might have a 4th thesis point, you might have a 5th, but likely you're going to have at least 3. In fact, 3 is the least you should have. A lot of people see this as being like, well, each point should be a page, and then that's how you get the 5-page thesis or 5-page paper. But that's not what we're doing here. You should have multiple paragraphs per thesis point, because the 5-paragraph essay just isn't a real thing that works or exists at a college level. At least not when you're trying to write like a 10 to 12 page paper, which is what this is. So just remember that. Don't feel like you have to stretch all of these ideas thin to like keep that 5-paragraph essay kind of thing. A point is more than one paragraph. It's just inevitably going to be. But the point of your thesis is going to be basically the start of a section that is going to prove a part of your thesis. So, for instance, if my thesis is that NCAA athletes, amateur athletes, need to be paid for sports. Yeah, that was bad. But if they need to be paid for their work, basically. Point one might be talking about likenesses. I might be saying other athletes and other celebrities are paid for their likenesses. And it's their legal right to be paid for their likenesses. So that might be my thesis point. So then from there, I would go to A. And A is going to be evidence from my source that shows that this is true. So I might cite some examples of professional sports and how they're being paid and what their right to their likenesses are. And then, it's going to say 1 and 2. So if A is sort of like the big chunk of evidence that I have, 1 and 2 is going to be maybe an analysis of that evidence, or maybe more evidence that supports that A. So if your big piece of evidence is like a quotation or a summary or something that helps prove, your thesis point 1, you're going to have that there. And you might have a couple other quotations that fall under that, or 1 and 2 might be the analysis of that. Either way, you're going to get that evidence there under the A. You're going to be like, this is evidence for my source. And then underneath of that, you're going to sort of analyze that evidence. Maybe have supplemental evidence that points to this evidence. And then point B from point 1 of thesis might be like, okay, so I have evidence that NFL players or whatever get paid for the likenesses. And I'm going to talk about the legal aspect, the rights that individuals have from their likeness. So that might be sort of like the big picture overall, and then you might go like, in this law, it says this thing. And then you would have 2 other things sort of analyzing that. And then you're going to repeat. Point 2 of your thesis, if you're talking about paying athletes, you might talk about disparity of work and pay. So you might talk about how coaches and the organizations make a ton of money, but the players don't. So you might, talk about your point of evidence might be coaches make X, teams make X, players make nothing. And you would quote that, of course, that's a piece of evidence. That's not just me saying it. That's something you're pulling from your sources and using. And then 1 and 2 would be breaking that down. Whether or not that's just your own analysis alone or your own analysis plus other quotes from that source or other sources. You're just expanding on that. And you're going to be doing that again. So let's say you have 3 thesis points. You're going to have at least 2 points of evidence for each of those thesis points, and each of those evidences should have at least 2 points of analysis. When we're thinking about an outline, we are thinking about it in terms of almost like a larger paragraph. In a good paragraph, you have your, you have your claim or your topic, then you have evidence for that topic, and then you have analysis of that evidence. And that's basically what we're doing here. We're just looking at it in a larger way. We're just kind of blowing it up. Okay, hopefully you're still with me. That was kind of a lot. Talking about outlines are difficult because they seem intuitive, but they also are very, there's a lot going on. And that's basically what you're going to do. Now, as a reminder, and this is kind of why I'm having you read out stuff about in-text citations this week, is that you are going to be either quoting paraphrasing or summarizing these points of evidence, but either way, you also have to make sure that you are using correct APA style citations. Now, I don't really... There's somebody doing the yard out there. I hope you can still hear me. Here, I'll do this. Maybe that will help. So yeah, that is something to consider. I have to get my head back into it. This is like the 4th take I've had on this video, so I really don't want to start over 20 minutes in. Okay, so in-text citations. Here we go. So you're going to have, and I don't know how to video edit because I'm dumb, so I'm going to learn to do that, but I don't know, whatever. Okay, so in-text citations, you're going to want to make sure that you have, at the very least, the author and the date. You can, of course, include a signal phrase. That will be very useful. That will help you moving forward to learn how to do it in big time. So, if point 1 of the thesis is like a quotation and this is what you're trying to prove, you would say something like, in blank, Dr. Smith says, whatever. And that's your point of thesis. But then again, you can also just have what your point is, and then underneath in evidence you say, Dr. Jones says this, you quote it, that's your piece of evidence, underneath that is your 2 analysis. That's actually what you should do. And you want to remember that you have the Dr. Smith's name, and then in parentheses, you're going to have 2018, when he was done. In MLA, which is what most of you are probably familiar with, it's usually required that you do page numbers. For APA, page numbers are, they can be encouraged, but they're not required. You usually, if you're doing footnotes or something, maybe, but at this level, you're really just telling me who said it and what source it's from. So in some ways, it's easier. A lot of people do like to include page numbers simply because it helps them reference it. So that's absolutely okay. Just make sure you see how that's done in APA citations. Again, if sort of like the first couple times we were doing the reference stuff, if not everything is perfect with your citations, that's okay. But at the same time, the citations are much less complex. So if you just need the author and the date, with maybe a signal phrase, I expect you to kind of be able to do that. Okay. So you're going to be doing that again and again, and then you're going to have a conclusion. This conclusion will, again, sort of be a test run on the conclusion for your paper. And then there's the reference list, which you already have done. Okay. So things I want to talk about with this, other than just sort of how you're going to do it. A lot of people think that outlines are annoying. They think that they're kind of a waste of time. One thing that you can do if you write a strong enough outline is you can literally fill in the blanks around it to write your paper. So if you write this outline and you find yourself like, oh, this outline is like 6 pages long, which it might be more. It might be less, depending on how detailed you get. You might think to yourself, wait a second, I have the point of my thesis, my point 1 of thesis. I already have 2 bricks of evidence, and I have analysis for that evidence. That's if I have all the filler language, this is at least a paragraph that's proving my point. And you'll notice if you do a thorough outline, you can do this for every thesis point, and all of a sudden you have close to 8 pages or maybe even 10 pages, and you realize this is a paper. Of course, it's a bit more work. You need to polish stuff. You might have to move stuff around. But if you have a strong outline, it's going to be almost nothing to jump from that outline to the actual paper. So that's one reason why outlines are so nice. The second... Seamus, stop. Sorry, my cat. He's being a weirdo. So the other reason why outlines are so good is you can sort of look at the ordering of stuff, how everything is organized, and you might say, okay, thesis point... Seamus, stop it. You've never bothered with that the entire time we've lived here. It's just cardboard box that I haven't moved for my computer. Anyways, so what you'll find is that if you have your point one of your thesis doesn't make sense at that point, you can shift stuff around. You can see what order things work in. A lot of times when we're writing a paper without an outline and we just try to like go for it in one burst, we might find ourselves thinking, okay, this is how everything should be. But sometimes that's not the case. Like if, for instance, going back to the come here. He just wants my attention. God. Sorry, I'm just so scattered today. This has been a rough couple days. So yeah, sometimes when we do stuff just in a row, it's easy to get stuck in our ways, just be like, okay, this is done. But as an outline, you can see like, okay, maybe my second point is better as my first point. Like if I'm talking about legal rights to likenesses, maybe that is actually a good foundational thing that I can have everything else spring from. If people are legally allowed to have it and they're only giving away their rights because they're told they can't by the NCAA, like that might be like one of your key points, and you want everything to flow from that. At the same time, maybe your paper is about sort of the morality as opposed to the law of it. So you still want to talk about the law in terms of their likenesses and other people getting paid. But if you're focusing more on the morality, you might start with the point about other people getting that money. They're the ones putting in the labor. This is what and how, we have to solve this. If that's the case, if you're focusing on the moral stuff, then the legal stuff might come later. So it really just depends on what you want to do. But the point behind this is that outlines are great because it allows you to see how you can make your paper stronger. Okay, so I'm going to upload a couple examples of outlines. I used to have a folder for that. For some reason, I didn't transfer that over when I built the class this time. And I'm also going to send a link to the lit review, or the library research guide, and then I will do that for you. So I'm going to stop this because I've just been rambling for a little bit. I hope this was useful. Again, I apologize for the last couple days, for not having some of your stuff graded, for being a little bit less communicative. Hey, stop. Hey. Anyways, I was going to show him too, but he's being stubborn. Yeah. Have a great day. Email me if you need me. Get hold of the library if you need me. All that sort of stuff. And I will talk to you all soon. Bye.